So let's move on to our next speaker. It's Malcolm Park, and he'll tell us about his Aurora chase adventure.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. My name is Malcolm Park, and among other things, I chase Aurora, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about a chase I recently did. Just a little bit about me before I start. I'm from Toronto, but I live just north of Kingston now, in Harrowsmith, Ontario, which is right beside Sydenham. It's about 15 minutes north of Kingston. I was a member of the North York Astronomical Association. I still am. I was president of that club for a while and coordinator for Starfest. I was an associate member of the Toronto Centre for a few years, but haven't been back to Toronto quite some time. But I am a member of the Kingston Centre of the RASC. So that's enough about me. I'm gonna talk about this event that occurred on October the 28th, and it carried on for about a week. But first, what is an Aurora chase? An Aurora chase, if you leave the comfort of your home and travel any distance, I consider you to be a chaser. And this is an example of an Aurora chase I did in 2012. And I lived in Cobourg at the time. And there was a KP5 event, and it was clear. But where I lived surrounded by light pollution. As people in Toronto know all too well, you have to get away from light pollution. And so the North York Astronomical Association has a facility north of Cobourg, about half an hour north. So I packed everything up and I drove up to Oak Heights, and I chased the clear sky, the dark sky where the Aurora was. This is another example of the chase. This is a solar eclipse chase. And that was a lot of driving. I'm sure many of you made drives similar to mine in 2017. That was a really, truly worthwhile experience. But the point here is that if an event is going to occur and you want to see it badly enough, you will do whatever it takes to get in the path of that event. Now, storm chasing is another kind of chasing that I've done. I've spent a few weeks on the Great Plains, and this is a tornado that I saw from about 10 kilometers away. The zoom on my lens makes it appear that much closer, but it was quite far away. But that was in 2016. That's another chase. I've chased the Geminids. There have been many times when the Geminids have fallen, well, at least two in the last 6 or 7 years, I think, where the Geminids fell on a moonless night, but the forecast here was hopeless. And so one time I went down to Arizona, and this particular time I went to New Mexico. It was just as cold in New Mexico as it was at home, but the sky was clear. So mission accomplished. And I've even chased lunar eclipses. I recall there was a lunar eclipse in Vermont. This particular one was in Texas. The lunar eclipse in Vermont, I think it was Vermont, and Charlie, Sheila, Sabatoff were heading east in their trailer, and we talked about this eclipse, and it turned out that this lunar eclipse had an ISS transit, and the intersect point for that was on the other side of the border. So although we didn't get our transit picture, we did get to the eclipse. But this one was in Texas, and the sky was just, well, not only was it the sky, it was, I believe, a nice comfortable 60, 70 degrees when the eclipse was at totality in the middle of the night. And I believe it was minus 20 back home on this particular night. So that was fun. But back to the present, and at least to the current year. October the 28th, there was a lot of solar activity on that particular day. And the result of that was that the forecasters determined that a coronal mass ejection was heading towards us. And they made forecasts of epic aurora, I will say. But this is the event on the sun that triggered all the mayhem. The black and white, in the end, it turns out, would appear to me to be the best image, even though the color ones are interesting. But it really feels like an explosion when you look at it in black and white. So on the next slide, this is the model that determined that a CME was heading towards the Earth. And the white is intense, and then the blue is, you know, nothing, and everything in between. So I'll just play that one more time. So you can see they're saying by the timestamp up at the top that October 30th and 31st were the impact dates. And this is a screen grab from the website SolarHam. I go to SolarHam a lot for things like this detailed forecast and some of the other things that they post. It's a good companion to spaceweather.com in that way. And lo and behold, the aurora forecast on October, this is from the 29th for the 30th, 31st, and 1st, was for a KP7. And boy, KP7, I have some good memories of KP7. I've only seen KP7 once. This is a KP7, and it's from 2012. And I got an APOD for this photo. And the memory is ingrained in my brain here. This was, I don't know that forecasts were as good as they are today, but I lived in Whitby at the time. And when I got off the train in the evening, it was dark. I looked north and I thought I saw a green glow from the GO station down in Whitby. And I called my friend Tony Ward, and I said, "What are you up to? Let's go north of the city lights and see what we can see." And so Tony and I picked Tony up in my car, and we drove up to Brooklyn, Ontario, which is it's right about where the new 407 highway runs, at Highway 12, if you know the area. And we got out of the car about 8:30. And yeah, there was a glow on the horizon. I had my camera set up on a tripod at the side of the road doing a time lapse. And then all of a sudden, all heck broke loose. And this happened at about 9:30. And we were calling all of our friends and telling everyone that we could think of to go have a look. And I took a picture of Tony that day, and this picture was published on the front cover of Sky News in one of the following issues. And that's Tony Ward of Starfest fame. He's usually the MC at Starfest. Anyway, KP7 sounded really enticing. And so I had to figure out, how am I going to chase this aurora event, or do I need to even chase this aurora event? So let's see what the situation is. On the 28th, Thursday, there's a CME. On the 29th, They're forecasting an aurora of they're forecasting a KP7 for the 30th and the 31st. Now, if the predictions are correct, I can only even think about this on a weekend because we have a really nice big dog and it requires a human being to look after it. So while I'm retired, my wife works, so weekdays are out. The only way this works is if I can be away on the weekend. So it fits pretty well for that requirement. Now, the next question is, where is it going to be clear? So here is the clear sky chart from, I believe, the 29th or 30th. And the little hash mark here, that's where I live. It's hopeless, hopeless, unless you go west of this boundary. So, okay, there's a possibility if I could go over there. And here's another map which shows the visibility zones, and the red is not visible. The green is likely to be visible, and the yellow is dodgy. But because of the clear sky chart cloud prediction showing this river of clear blue in between these two white areas, I thought there was hope. So I thought, well, what's up there? How am I going to, like, what are the logistics? You know, I need somewhere to get warm. It's going to be cold. It would be nice to have electricity and Wi-Fi and all this stuff. So I found, you know, my hope was to find a waterfront location that I would get reflections and I would see it would just enhance things, I think, if I found the waterfront location. And I found this thing called Ranger Lake Resort. So if you zoom in, Ranger Lake Resort is on Ranger Lake. It's on the south shore of Ranger Lake, facing north. And an even tighter zoom on Google Earth shows there's this dock here, which looks like it would be perfect. So I made a quick call to discuss with my wife. Excuse me. No issues there. So I call Ranger Lake, and they are a dream. They have everything I need. They have a nice log cabin, a wood stove, and they have Wi-Fi, internet. So I tell them I'll be there around 5 p.m. on Saturday, and I pack everything up on Friday night. And this is what I've gotten myself into. Home here is just north of Kingston. And driving to Toronto, north to Sudbury, west to Ranger Lake, 9.5 hours. I do drives like this a lot. I wouldn't say every day, but I do. I don't have a problem doing a drive like this. So getting up at 7 a.m. get me there about 5. Getting there at 5, sunset at that time was before the time change. It was about 6:30. And so that gave me plenty of time to scout, set up equipment during the daylight, and get my time lapse going and stuff like that. So it all fit very well. The traffic was fine for a Saturday morning at 5 a.m. or sorry, at 7 a.m. No problem. I did alter my return trip. I went up the north end of Algonquin Park to come home, just for something different. Just to give you an idea of what the skies are like where I live and where I was going. So I live right about here. So if I'm pointing north, there's not too much light pollution. If I'm pointing south, it's a bit of an issue. But generally, it's not too bad for astrophotography. But this little dot here, I put that on the map. There's actually no light pollution there. That's just to remind me where the spot is. So that's where the lodge is, and there is no light pollution there. Okay, chase day, Saturday, October 30th, 7 a.m. So as I say, I packed the car the night before. I'm ready to go bright and early. And what's it like here at home? Cloudy, rainy, dark, foggy, miserable. I'm happy to leave. I do a sanity check before I leave, just to make sure that the satellite and the clear sky chart are in agreement, that I'm not making a horrible mistake weather-wise. Looks okay to me. So all systems are go. So as I said, it was raining when I started. It was raining all the way to Toronto and up to Barrie. By the time I got north of Barrie, the rain had finished and it was dry. And by the time I got to Sudbury, I could see the blue sky in the west. And by the time I got to Elliott Lake-ish, it was really clear. And this is an example of the day. So from a weather standpoint, mission accomplished. So here I am after I've arrived, and I'm on the South Shore. Everything is as I expected. The cabin beside the white car there is the cabin that I had. And the dock was on the other side of that lodge on the left, just down the hill towards the water. And it was just beautiful. And the lodge is open year-round because they cater also to ice fishing. This lake is huge and deep, and they have lake trout. So it's a year-round operation. And so now here is my setup. And this is the dock that I saw on Google Maps. And I am pointing due north. And I'll talk a bit about my gear after the time-lapse sequence. But at this point, we'll play the video that I came up with. there is some irony to be presented in this presentation. So the KP index only got to 4 on this particular night. The display was mainly back of camera only. There was a hint of it in the to the naked eye, not the glory of the KP7 that I was hoping for. And here's the solar activity on the top and the KP index at the bottom. It just got up to KP4 on the 2 days. But that was on the Sunday. By Wednesday, all heck broke loose in the Aurora KP index, and we had the KP7 that wasn't forecast. It was forecast to be KP6, and Alberta got the best of it. The Aurora oval looked like that, and from my backyard I got this. Now you could chuckle and say, geez, all that driving, and the KP7 was visible from your backyard eventually. But I don't see it that way. I enjoyed myself and I had fun. But even this KP7, that's as good as it got. That's the best frame from the KP7. Alberta, or Western Canada, they got the good stuff. And this is a satellite picture showing why. We are, or at least I am, down here. That's Kingston. I don't think we could be, or Toronto, I don't think we could, either one of us could be further away from the Aurora anywhere in Canada, really, unless we were maybe in Windsor. Meanwhile, over in Western Canada, it was right on top. So this is a satellite shot, and the bright stuff is the Aurora. So that's just an aside at the end, where my chase was not wholly unsuccessful, not wholly successful, but I did get an enjoyable time-lapse sequence out of it. And I'll just finish off with a little bit about how I create my time-lapse sequences and the capture process and the software side of things. So in this case, the gear is the Nikon D800 DSLR, the 14-24 f2.8 lens. It was shot at 14 millimeters and f2.8. Standard tripod and dew strap and controller and intervalometer. And all of this is run from an extension cord in the lodge that I showed that I was staying at. So having power is a really huge benefit. Otherwise, I'd be looking at batteries, and that's very difficult. I have a TP-Link wireless portable router, battery-powered router on the in my kit, and the reason for that is it provides wireless connectivity to the camera, allowing me to change the settings on the camera without touching it, and also using software to automate that feature. And the software that does that is called QDSLR Dashboard, and it runs on my Samsung Galaxy tablet. So this is what the camera did look like. The white device on the top is that router. There's a dew strap, intervalometer, and dew heater controller. And the intervals were 16-second intervals maximum. So the 16-second interval never changed. I started off in the daytime in, say, 1/40th or 1/80th of a second, and still with a 16-second, progressed my exposures all the way to 13 seconds and ISO 3200. I believe it was ISO 100 to begin with. So this is the interface on my tablet using QDSLR Dashboard. And this is how I control the settings changing on my DSLR. And it's important for a period of time that I be able to do this. And the period of time is from when it's daylight until fully dark. And during that time, I use the settings over here to tell the software to drop my exposure from 1/110th of a second to 13 seconds, and to change the ISO from ISO 100 to ISO 3200. And it does this because on the camera, I'm shooting in RAW and JPEG, and the JPEG is sent wirelessly from the camera to the software. It analyzes and takes a 5-frame average of the brightness of those frames. And once this brightness threshold drops, it changes automatically the shutter speed. And once the shutter speed reaches its slowest shutter speed, then it changes the ISO. And then once the ISO reaches its target, I don't need this device anymore, and I can turn it off. The intervalometer is connected to the camera, and it continues all night to take a 13-second ISO 3200 exposure every 16 seconds. 3 seconds was necessary to allow the transfer of an image to the software. So in post-processing, I use LR Time-Lapse and Adobe Lightroom. And I'm just going to show you the screens for each and how they work together. I'm not going to go in depth on this at all. But this is LR Time-Lapse. Oops, I missed a slide there. Sorry about that. I want you to understand how this works. So LR Time-Lapse is a time-lapse processing piece of software designed for users of Lightroom. Lightroom is a database with an image processing user interface, but it's primarily a database. LR Time-Lapse connects to Lightroom's database and affects changes to that database. And those changes then can be seen in Lightroom in the user interface. You go back and forth between the two programs to make your edits. At the end of the day, you end up with a balanced sequence. So this is the preview screen and the working screen of LR Time-Lapse. And I'll just drag this across, and it shows you how one of the features of the preview. All of these columns represent one of the editable fields in Lightroom. For example, when you're in Lightroom develop mode, when I started, my image looked like this. When I finished, and this is one of the 2800 frames. Each of these adjustments here was made from LR Time-Lapse, not by moving a slider. I have 2800 frames in Lightroom to edit. I'm not doing them one at a time. I do not have the patience for that. And this is the benefit of LR Time-Lapse. So what happens is, just change the view. You set a bunch of keyframes in LR Time-Lapse, and you just edit the keyframes. So for example, I edited frame 1, and then frame 2, and then frame 3. Sequentially from 1 through 10, saved all of my changes, went back to LR Time-Lapse, and LR Time-Lapse calculates the transitions required for the 280 frames in between each of the 10 keyframes. And then it gives you a graphical representation of the smoothness of those changes, and it allows you to deflicker them. And at the end of the day, you come up with a vastly superior presentation to what you would do, let's say, manually. So I won't go into it in too much more detail than that, just to say, at the end of the day, to create your sequence, you select the LR time-lapse export feature, and it sends it off to LR time-lapse, and you get this render screen, and you end up with the presentation that I showed you without the music. Adding the music's another thing entirely. And I think that will cover the process of creating a time lapse.
Okay, very good. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, Malcolm. Great adventure and great time lapse, and also very educational as well. I've never tried a time lapse myself. Maybe I'll get to it one day. Do we have any questions for Malcolm?
Yes, we have one question coming in from RASC Toronto. I've seen a fair number of auroras up to the 55th latitude, but they were always green. Is it a question of using filters with photography to bring out the brilliant colors?
No, it's a function of the molecular interactions in the atmosphere and the energy in the solar storm that's hitting us. So I think when you're mainly seeing green, those would be in the KP2 and 3 range up north, like far up north, especially in the range of Yellowknife or Iceland. I believe, and Alaska, they tend to get aurora throughout the winter continuously in that color range. And I'm not sure if that's where you, or if northern Alberta or something like that. But when we in the southern latitudes start to see aurora, just by nature of the energy that's required for the aurora to be visible here, it tends to produce more color.
Well, thank you. That's it for the questions.
Okay. Thanks again, Malcolm. Really appreciate your presentation.